By the mid-18th century, the 13 American colonies had grown into a thriving, heavily populated region. For decades, they operated with a high degree of self-governance, managing their own local economies and writing their own laws. Many of the people living there were immigrants, or descendants of immigrants, who had explicitly fled Europe to escape political oppression and religious persecution. That history created a culture deeply protective of its independence. This map shows the colonies following the 7 Years' War. Britain secured a massive military victory, driving the French out of North America. But cleaning these vast new Western territories came at a crippling cost. Defending this frontier required military resources they didn't have. Looking at this chart, you can see the scale of the financial crisis. Britain emerged from the conflict with a deficit of £130 million. They lacked the funds to even pay their own standing military. Parliament had a choice. Rather than extracting more taxes from citizens in England, who were already stretched thin, they decided to shift the financial burden across the Atlantic. A desperately indebted empire was now attempting to extract vast amounts of wealth from a distant populace that was entirely conditioned to govern itself. The restrictions started in 1763. The Royal Proclamation drew a hard boundary, legally banning colonists from settling the western lands they had just shed blood to claim. Economic strikes followed in 1764. The Sugar Act levied heavy taxes on luxury goods like coffee and wine, while the Currency Act banned the colonies from printing their own paper money, instantly crippling local commerce. Then came the physical intrusions. Under the Quartering Act of 1765, colonists were legally forced to open their doors, providing food and housing to British troops. This sheet of 1-penny revenue stamps represents the breaking point. The Stamp Act of 1765 applied an unavoidable tax to printed paper, from legal documents to local licenses. Citizens had to purchase a royal seal for everyday transactions, making British authority inescapable. The sheer volume of these acts convinced the colonists that Parliament had moved beyond revenue collection and into the systematic dismantling of American self-rule. Tensions moved from paper laws to physical violence in 1770. Surrounded British soldiers leveled their muskets and fired directly into a hostile Boston crowd. When the smoke cleared, 5 colonists lay dead, with several more severely wounded. Even though the soldiers were later defended in court to ensure a fair trial, their eventual acquittal on the most serious charges fueled a growing anti-British sentiment that organizers used to keep the memory of the event alive for years. Protesters retaliated against British economics. In what became known as the Boston Tea Party, citizens boarded merchant ships and dumped entire cargoes of British tea into the harbor. Parliament responded with extreme force, passing the Intolerable Acts specifically to punish the colonies for the destroyed property. These laws zeroed in on Massachusetts, stripping the state of its right to self-rule and placing its citizens under the direct authoritarian control of the British government. Britain thought isolating Massachusetts would crush the rebellion. Instead, it proved to the other 12 colonies that none of their local rights were safe. The Intolerable Acts forced a unified response. Delegates from 12 distinct colonies traveled to Independence Hall in Philadelphia to convene the First Continental Congress. At first, they didn't ask for a new country. They simply demanded a repeal of the punitive taxes, while offering to remain loyal members of the British Commonwealth. Parliament entirely rejected these demands. Left with no political recourse, the colonies convened the Second Continental Congress to officially prepare for a continent-wide war. On July 4, 1776, colonial leaders codified their final break from the empire with this document, the Declaration of Independence. The text transformed the rebellion from a dispute over specific taxes into a formal legal demand for total sovereignty. The resulting Revolutionary War, commanded by George Washington, dragged on for years until critical military and naval support from France finally turned the tide. These signatures and red wax seals on the Treaty of Paris mark the legal finality of the victory. Signed in 1783, this document marks Britain's official concession of defeat, granting full autonomy to the colonies. In a desperate attempt to settle its war debts, Great Britain's heavy-handed policies achieved what many thought impossible. they forced 13 often conflicting colonies to unite, creating the foundation for a new independent republic.